There are griefs that arrive like sudden storms, violent and undeniable, tearing through everything in their path. And then there are griefs that settle quietly into the bones, reshaping a life from within without ever announcing themselves. For Daphne and Carter, the pain of not being able to have a child belonged to the latter, a slow and relentless ache that grew sharper with each passing year, each silent evening, each moment where possibility slipped further out of reach. It was not just the absence of a child that haunted them, but the absence of a future they had once imagined so vividly that it had felt inevitable. A home filled with laughter, small footsteps echoing down hallways, a sense of continuity that would anchor their love in something tangible and enduring. Instead, their home had become too quiet, too orderly, every space untouched by the chaos that comes with life, and that silence had begun to feel less like peace and more like a reminder of what was missing. Daphne carried that silence differently than Carter, where he tried to fill it with routine, with distraction, with a kind of quiet resilience that masked his own disappointment. She allowed it to seep into her, to define the way she saw herself and the world around her. There were moments when she would pause in the middle of an ordinary day, her thoughts drifting toward the life she might have had, and the weight of that imagined reality would press down on her so heavily that she could barely breathe. She questioned herself constantly, wondering whether there had been something she could have done differently, whether her body had betrayed her, or whether fate had simply chosen a path for her that she had no power to alter. Carter saw it in her eyes, in the way she lingered just a little too long when she watched other families, in the way her smile faltered when conversations turned to children, to milestones she would never reach. It was Carter who first suggested adoption, though the idea had lived quietly between them for some time, unspoken but ever present. He approached it carefully, not wanting to offer it as a solution that erased their pain, but as a possibility that might transform it into something meaningful. His words were measured, gentle, but beneath them lay a desperation he rarely allowed himself to express. He wanted to give Daphne something to hold on to, something that could replace the emptiness that had begun to consume her. And more than that, he wanted to believe that love was not limited by biology, that a family could still be built even if it did not follow the path they had once envisioned. For Daphne, the idea was both comforting and terrifying. It offered hope, but it also forced her to confront the reality of what she had lost. Accepting adoption meant accepting that the life she had dreamed of would never exist in the way she had imagined it. It meant letting go of a version of herself she had clung to for so long. And yet, there was something in Carter's quiet conviction, in the way he spoke not of replacing what they had lost, but of creating something new that stirred something within her. A fragile, hesitant hope. The day they arrived at the orphanage, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with anticipation and unspoken emotion. The building itself stood modestly, its exterior unremarkable, but inside it held countless stories, countless lives shaped by loss, abandonment, and the uncertain promise of something better. As they stepped inside, Daphne felt a strange mixture of anxiety and longing, as if she were standing on the threshold of something that could change everything. Children's voices echoed faintly through the halls, a mixture of laughter and noise that felt both chaotic and beautiful. Carter reached for Daphne's hand, his grip steady, grounding her as they were greeted by a staff member whose smile carried both warmth and a subtle awareness of the weight of moments like this. There was a quiet understanding in the way she spoke, a recognition that for many who walked through these doors, this was not just a visit, but a turning point. They were led through a series of rooms, each one filled with small glimpses of lives waiting to be chosen, waiting to be seen. Daphne tried to focus, to remain open, but her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. Every child she saw carried a story she could not fully understand, a past she could not erase. The responsibility of it all pressed down on her, making her question whether she was strong enough, whether she could truly give a child the life they deserved. And then they were led to her. The little girl sat quietly, her small figure almost blending into the corner of the room, as if she had learned not to draw attention to herself. There was something in the way she held herself, a guarded stillness that suggested a depth of experience far beyond her years. When she looked up, her eyes met Daphne's, and in that instant, something shifted. Recognition. It was not immediate, not fully formed, but it was there, a flicker of familiarity that made Daphne's breath catch. There was something about the child's face, the shape of her features, the intensity in her gaze, that stirred a memory she could not yet place. She took a step closer, her heart beginning to race as the feeling grew stronger, more insistent. And then it hit her. Luna. The name surfaced in her mind with a force that left her reeling. The resemblance was undeniable now that she allowed herself to see it. The curve of the jaw, the way the eyes seemed to hold secrets too heavy for a child to carry. Daphne's world tilted, the room around her fading as the implications of what she was seeing began to take shape. It was impossible. Luna was gone. Everything they had known, everything they had been told, pointed to that undeniable conclusion. And yet, here was this child, standing in front of her like a living contradiction, a piece of a story that was not supposed to exist. Daphne's knees weakened, her body struggling to process the shock. Carter moved quickly, his concern immediate, his arms steadying her as she faltered. He looked from Daphne to the child, confusion etched into his features, trying to understand what could have caused such a reaction. "What is it?" he asked, though the question felt inadequate in the face of whatever was unfolding. Daphne could barely find the words. Her voice trembled as she spoke, each syllable carrying the weight of disbelief. "She looks like Luna." The name hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Carter's expression shifted, the confusion giving way to something more serious, more cautious. He had not forgotten Luna, nor the chaos and fear that had surrounded her. The idea that she could still be connected to anything in their lives was unsettling enough. But the possibility that this child was somehow tied to her was something far more disturbing. Before either of them could fully process it, another presence entered the room. Bridget. Her arrival carried an urgency that immediately heightened the tension, her expression serious, her eyes moving quickly between Daphne, Carter, and the child. There was no pretense, no attempt to soften what she was about to reveal. She understood too well the gravity of the situation, the way truth, once spoken, could not be undone. The test results confirmed it. The child was Luna's. The words landed like a blow, each one dismantling the fragile understanding of reality they had been clinging to. Daphne's shock deepened into something darker, something edged with fear. If the child existed, if Luna had a child, then it meant only one thing. Luna had not disappeared in the way they had believed. She was out there, alive. The implications of that realization spread quickly, touching every corner of their thoughts. Luna was not just a memory, not just a closed chapter. She was a threat that had never truly been neutralized, a presence that could reemerge at any moment. Carter felt the weight of it settle heavily on his shoulders, his concern shifting from confusion to something more urgent, more protective. This was no longer just about adoption, about building a family. This was about safety, about the potential danger that had just been placed directly in front of them. Where was Luna? The question lingered, unanswered but impossible to ignore. Bridget's expression made it clear that this was not a coincidence, not an isolated discovery. There was a pattern here, something unfolding beneath the surface that they had yet to fully understand. Her instinct was immediate, driven by both professional responsibility and personal loyalty to protect the Forster family. Whatever Luna was planning, whatever she had set in motion, it was not over. Daphne's fear grew with each passing second, her mind racing through possibilities she did not want to consider. The child, innocent and unaware, suddenly felt like a connection to something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. The hope she had carried into this place began to unravel, replaced by a chilling uncertainty. And yet, beneath that fear, something else remained. A pull. Because despite everything, despite the shock and the danger, she could not look at the child without feeling something deep and undeniable. Compassion, connection, a strange, fragile bond that refused to be dismissed. Carter saw it in her, understood it even as he grappled with his own fears. This was not just about what the child represented, but about what she needed, and that truth complicated everything. The moment stretched, filled with questions that had no answers, decisions that could not yet be made. And somewhere beyond the walls of that orphanage, unseen but undeniably present, a figure watched. Hidden in the distance, obscured by shadows, the observer remained still, their gaze fixed on the scene unfolding inside. There was no urgency in their posture, no sign of concern, only patience, calculation, and then, slowly, a smile. Not one of warmth or relief, but something far more unsettling, something that hinted at a plan already in motion, at a future that had been carefully constructed long before this moment. The past was not buried. It had only been waiting, and now it was beginning to rise again. The realization did not settle all at once. It spread slowly, like a crack beneath the surface of something that had once seemed solid. Daphne felt it first as a tremor in her chest, a quiet, persistent unease that refused to be silenced even as the room around her remained still. The child stood there, small and silent, unaware of the storm that had just been unleashed by her mere existence. And yet, in that stillness, Daphne felt something far more unsettling than chaos. She felt inevitability, as though this moment had been moving toward her long before she ever stepped into that orphanage. Carter sensed it too, though his instincts translated it differently. Where Daphne felt a pull, he felt a warning. His mind moved quickly, attempting to impose logic on something that defied it, searching for explanations that could restore a sense of control. But every path led back to the same question, one that now carried a weight he could not ignore. If the child was Luna's, then Luna had not vanished in the way they had believed. And if she had not vanished, then she had chosen to remain hidden. That choice alone spoke volumes, and none of the possibilities it suggested were comforting. Bridget stepped closer, her voice lower now, more measured, but no less urgent. She explained the circumstances of the test, the inconsistencies that had first raised suspicion, the quiet investigation that had followed. Nothing about this had been accidental. The child had not simply appeared. She had been placed. The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Someone had wanted this discovery to happen, but not all at once, not in a way that could be easily traced. It had been orchestrated carefully, deliberately, like a move in a game that had already been unfolding beyond their awareness. Daphne's thoughts began to fracture under the weight of it. She looked at the child again, this time not just seeing resemblance, but possibility. Had Luna abandoned her? Had she been forced to? Or was this something else entirely? Something more calculated? The idea that Luna might still be alive was terrifying enough, but the possibility that she had been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment to reinsert herself into their lives, turned that fear into something far more suffocating. It suggested intent. It suggested purpose. The child shifted slightly under their gaze, her small hands tightening together as if she could feel the tension surrounding her. There was a quiet resilience in her posture, a guarded awareness that did not belong to someone her age. Daphne noticed it immediately, and it deepened the ache in her chest. This was not just a symbol of something dangerous. This was a life shaped by circumstances she had not chosen, by decisions made long before she could understand them. And in that realization, Daphne felt her fear begin to twist into something else. Responsibility. It was not logical. It was not safe. But it was there, undeniable and growing stronger with each passing second. Because despite everything, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she could not separate the child from the idea of what she needed: a home, protection, a chance at something better. And perhaps, in some quiet, unspoken way, Daphne saw a reflection of her own longing in that small, silent figure. Not for a child of her own blood, but for a connection that could anchor her in a world that had felt increasingly hollow. Carter saw the shift in her before she even spoke. It was in the way her shoulders straightened slightly, in the way her gaze softened even as her fear remained. He understood what it meant, and it terrified him, because this was no longer just about hope. This was about risk. Taking this child into their lives would not simply fill a void. It would open a door to something unpredictable, something potentially dangerous. "Daphne," he said quietly, his voice careful, measured, "we don't know what this means yet." But she did not look away from the child. "No," she replied softly, her voice trembling but resolute, "but she does." That answer unsettled him more than anything else she could have said. It spoke of a decision that was not yet fully formed, but already taking root. It spoke of a willingness to step into uncertainty, not because it was safe, but because it felt necessary. Bridget watched them both, her expression tightening as she processed the direction this was heading. Her instincts, sharpened by both experience and loyalty, screamed caution. This was not a situation that could be approached with emotion alone. Luna was not just a name, not just a past threat. She was someone capable of manipulation, of deception, of actions that blurred the line between survival and control. If she had orchestrated this, if she had allowed her child to be found in this way, then it was not an act of desperation. It was strategy. "We need to think about security," Bridget said firmly, her tone cutting through the fragile emotional atmosphere. "If Luna is alive, and if she's connected to this, then she's already steps ahead of us. We can't assume this is just about the child." Carter nodded immediately, relief flickering in his eyes at the grounding presence of logic. "She's right. This could be a setup. We don't know who's watching, who's waiting." At that, something cold settled in the room, because the truth was they were not alone. Beyond the walls, beyond the carefully maintained illusion of safety, there was a presence that had already been confirmed, not by sight, but by instinct, by the subtle sense that events were unfolding according to a plan none of them fully understood. The idea that they were being observed, that their reactions, their decisions, were part of something larger, made every moment feel exposed. Daphne felt it then, a sudden, inexplicable chill that ran through her, as though something unseen had brushed against her awareness. Her gaze shifted instinctively toward the window, toward the world outside, but there was nothing there. Only stillness, only shadows, and yet the feeling did not fade. Far from the orphanage, positioned just beyond the reach of light and visibility, a figure remained motionless, their attention unwavering. The distance did not diminish their clarity of sight, nor did it lessen their understanding of what was unfolding inside. They had anticipated this moment, calculated it with precision, and now, as they watched the emotional fracture begin to widen, they felt something dangerously close to satisfaction. Because this was never just about being seen. It was about control. Inside, the tension reached a quiet peak, not through action, but through realization. Each of them stood at the edge of a decision that would shape everything that came next. Daphne's desire to protect, to nurture, to claim a piece of the life she had been denied. Carter's need to shield her, to prevent her from stepping into something that could destroy them both. Bridget's determination to contain a threat before it could fully emerge. And at the center of it all, the child. Unaware, unprotected, and yet undeniably significant. Daphne took a slow step forward, her movements deliberate now, no longer hesitant. The fear remained, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it sharpened her focus, clarified her intent. She knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level, her expression softening in a way that felt both natural and deeply profound. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but something passed between them anyway, a quiet recognition, not of identity, but of need. Carter watched, his heart tightening as he realized that this moment, simple as it seemed, was the beginning of something irreversible. Whatever decision was made here would not just change their lives. It would pull them into a story that had already begun, a story that carried with it consequences none of them could fully predict. And somewhere in the distance, hidden behind layers of shadow and intention, the observer's smile deepened. Because the first move had been made,